In today's video, we're diving into the era of Jefferson, from a fierce and controversial election to the expansion of the nation's borders, a radical shift in the role of government, and pivotal Supreme Court rulings. The age of Thomas Jefferson reshaped America politically, territorially, and ideologically. Let's get started. The election of 1800 pitted the Democratic Republican ticket of Thomas Jefferson and Aaron Burr against incumbent President John Adams and his Federalist allies Charles Pinckney and John Jay. At the time, the Constitution had not yet been amended to separate electoral votes for president and vice president. Each elector cast two votes, and the top vote getter became president, while the runner up became vice president. When the votes were counted, Jefferson and Burr were tied, each receiving 73 votes. The tie threw the election to the House of Representatives, still controlled by Federalists and operating in its final days before the new Congress would take over. It took 35 ballots, but finally on February 17, 1801, Jefferson was elected the third president of the United States. For the first time in American history, power shifted peacefully from one party, the Federalists, to another, the Democratic Republicans. Jefferson would later call it a revolution as real as that of 1776. Jefferson's presidency marked the beginning of a Democratic Republican political dynasty. He won re-election in a landslide in 1804, defeating his Federalist opponent 162 to 14. His allies, James Madison and James Monroe, would follow him in the White House, dominating American politics for 2 decades. Democratic Republicans also held significant majorities in Congress throughout this era, between 60% and 85% of the seats, allowing them to shape legislation with little resistance. Jefferson and his followers imagined an ideal America as a land of independent farmers, distanced from the corruption and complexity of European style urban industry. They favored localism, simplicity, and above all, a federal government of limited power. Jefferson famously said that government is best which governs least. But as Jefferson would soon discover, shrinking the federal government while managing a growing nation, well, that's not so easy. As part of his mission to scale back government power, Jefferson reduced the size of the military and navy to help balance the budget. He also eliminated many federal jobs. He repealed excise taxes, including the unpopular whiskey tax. And he also cut the national debt from $83 million to $57 million in just 8 years. But even as he aimed to limit government, Jefferson found himself overseeing one of the largest federal expansions in U.S. history, the Louisiana Purchase. Jefferson believed that the Mississippi River and New Orleans were vital to America's future. Without access to these, he feared that the young country would lose everything west of the Appalachians. When France, under Napoleon Bonaparte, regained Louisiana from Spain, Jefferson became deeply concerned. He dispatched his friend James Monroe to France with instructions to offer up to $10 million for New Orleans and Florida. But fate intervened. Napoleon was struggling to crush a slave revolt in Haiti, where yellow fever decimated his army. Needing funds and unable to maintain his American empire, Napoleon Bonaparte offered the entire Louisiana Territory, not just New Orleans, for $15 million. On April 10, 1803, the deal was struck. Though the Constitution didn't explicitly grant the president the power to acquire foreign territory, Jefferson submitted the treaty to the Senate, and the Republican majority quickly ratified it. The result? 828,000 square miles added to the United States, doubling the nation's size and removing a major European presence from American borders. The Louisiana Purchase deeply alarmed New England Federalists, who feared their power would shrink with the addition of new Western states. In 1804, some, led by Timothy Pickering, even plotted to secede and form a Northern Confederacy. The plan collapsed, but It reflected how deeply sectional tensions were growing. In a tragic side note, this political chaos contributed to the infamous Burr Hamilton duel, which ended with Alexander Hamilton's death and further cemented the tense, emotionally charged politics of the Jeffersonian age. While Jefferson was expanding territory, America's merchant ships were being seized by Britain and France, who were at war with each other. Between 1803 and 1807, the British captured 500 American ships, and the French seized over 200. Things came to a head in 1807 when the British warship Leopard fired on the USS Chesapeake just off the coast of Norfolk, Virginia, killing 3 Americans and impressing 4 others into the British Navy. With America militarily unprepared for war, Jefferson responded with the Embargo Act of 1807, which banned all American exports. While imports were technically allowed, few foreign ships came to American ports if they couldn't return with cargo. The result? Economic disaster. Exports plummeted from 108 million to 22 million. Imports dropped from 138 million to under 57 million. Public outrage was widespread. By the end of Jefferson's presidency, Congress repealed the Embargo Act and replaced it with the Non Intercourse Act of 1809, which restricted trade only with Britain and France. Although the Federalists lost the presidency and Congress, they did maintain control in the federal courts, including the Supreme Court, where Chief Justice John Marshall, Jefferson's own cousin, would leave a lasting impact. Marshall's tenure, lasting 34 years, saw landmark decisions that expanded federal power, often in direct contradiction to Jeffersonian ideals. In Marbury v. Madison of 1803, Marshall ruled that the Supreme Court could invalidate federal laws that conflicted with the Constitution, establishing the principle of judicial review. In Fletcher v. Peck of 1810, the court declared that states could not invalidate contracts, making it the first time a state law was ruled unconstitutional. In McCulloch v. Maryland of 1819, when Maryland tried to tax the Second Bank of the United States, Marshall ruled that states couldn't tax federal institutions, declaring federal laws supreme over state laws. Jefferson might have been reducing federal power in the executive branch, but the judiciary under Marshall was quietly doing the opposite. After the Louisiana Purchase, Jefferson secured $2,500 from Congress to explore the vast new territory. He appointed Meriwether Lewis and William Clark to lead the expedition. Their journey across the continent yielded invaluable scientific and geographic knowledge. It strengthened U.S. claims to the Oregon Territory and improved relations with Native American tribes. And as a bonus, they sent back 2 grizzly bear cubs for the president's mansion. The era of Jefferson was filled with contradictions: a champion of limited government who doubled the size of the country, a lover of peace who presided over mounting tensions, and a visionary who couldn't always control the reality he helped create. But what's undeniable is this: Jefferson and the Democratic Republicans who followed him reshaped the American Republic in profound ways, politically, geographically, and ideologically. That's all the time we have for today. Thanks for joining me. We'll see you next time.